Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Discussing a Murder. This is Jeff Jones welcoming back partial panel with the special welcome back to Big Jeff. We'll start from the bottom just because you got your video on, you got a Christmas scene behind you, Big Jeff. It's been a few weeks. Happy to have you back. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Well, thanks, Jeff. I mean, a lot of people know that I just got back from my replacement of my right knee surgery. It was a little bit rough at first, but I'm good to be back. It's really good to be back among friends, and especially around Christmas time. That's the right place to be around friends during Christmas time. Glad to see everybody. Glad to see everybody in chat. And thank you so much for hosting and having me back again.
You're very welcome there, Big Jeff. I notice you have a major award.
Power of the mind, Jeff.
That's right. The power of the mind. That's right. Well, Dr. Silkman, he can tell us about the power of the mind as well. Welcome back, Dr. Silkman.
It's great to be here, Jeff, and great to see Big Jeff back with a smile on his face. So we certainly missed his big wrap-up comments, and it's great to have him back on the team. And I'd like to welcome everybody, all my fellow panel members and everyone in chat. It's great to be here, and thank you so much for your continued support. Awesome.
Absolutely, Dr. Silkman. Thank you for that. Welcome back. And Kel, welcome back.
Thank you for having me back. And of course, it is awesome to have Big Jeff back. Missed you so much. And I hope everyone had a really great Christmas. Everyone had great family time, stayed safe, ate, was merry, and yeah, let's get going.
With that said, let's move right into it. This is the beginning of episode 4 of MAM, entitled Welcome to Wisconsin.
Yesterday I was at rec. I was going back from rec and trading before I almost landed on my shoulder.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Me and this other guy were talking and it just landed on me.
Yeah, but that's your symbol, Brendan.
Yeah, I know.
That means change is coming.
Yeah.
People are used to not having hope. And when suddenly a door opens and there is light and there is this possibility, and people start thinking, maybe I'm going to get my baby back. That's a very hard moment in a case, because that's when emotions start to run high. The rediscovery of hope can be a really hard moment. Brendan's been incarcerated for 10 years, and suddenly he gets a whiff of what it might mean to be free. In a way, this moment is almost crueler than the wait, because now there's hope that could still be taken away. Prosecutors dedicate their lives to putting people behind bars, but the fascinating thing is the prosecutors never get a chance, or rarely get a chance, to actually talk to those people. They really are sort of names on a page to them. And that's how the system is designed, but they never get the chance to see the humanity in people. One of the defense attorney's credos is you are more than the worst thing you've ever done. In Brendan's case, more than the worst thing you didn't do.
Only Lynn's in my mind now. Next month she'll be up to see me. That'll be the first time I met her in person. With Lynn, I feel everything is there. She wants somebody where she can relax for the rest of her life, with a good man. No arguing, no fighting, no nothing. Just by that, that's what I want. I want somebody who is going to be there, who loves me, and I take it all the way to the end. When you get involved with me, you get a lot of attention and all of this other stuff, and I asked her about that sometimes. I just tell her, don't worry about what everybody's saying on the internet.
Stephen has become the world's strangest sex symbol now. He's receiving, according to some reports, up to 40 letters a week in prison from women lining up to be his next wife. Stephen Avery became engaged to this beautiful, statuesque blonde. They initially began speaking through love letters to one another, and then they started talking on the phone.
The last few months have been more difficult than our relationship over the years. And most of it is because of these women. And I've tried to be understanding and realize that he's never had this before. He's never had this attention before. And just try to sit back and let it happen, whatever he wants to do about this. That I try to protect him, and I said I've been protecting you for over 10 years and I'm still doing it. You know, trying to protect him from the people out there that don't have good motives.
I'm kind of lost right now with Sandy. She tells me that she loves me and she was sorry for what she did, you know, trying to break it off and everything else. And I don't know. It's hard for me that I know that she's hurting. You know, I want to be Sandy's friend forever. Because she helped me, so I want to help her.
Okay, that's good. Oh, I never had so many flowers. Wait, where's my glasses? I think they're in the car. Oh.
Are these all birthday cards?
Yeah. So,
Wow.
this is from Stephen. Happy birthday, Mom. I love you and miss you a lot. I will be home, home soon. I love you, Mom. You are the best mom in the world. I love you, Mom. It will be better in 2017.
I love you.
I love you too.
Guys, happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you.
Tell Stephen I say hi.
Yeah. It's a great day today. We're going to see Stephen.
Oh, look at your hair. That's so cute. Did you go get your prescription filled that I told you to go get filled?
Yep.
All right. And you took one this morning?
No, not the pain one, I didn't. But I maybe took that other one, what I had before. I can't take both of them.
No, you be wacky tobacco.
Yeah. And today's not the day I want to get wacky.
No.
Boy, are we lucky that the filmmakers captured all of this. You know, like I said, I remember when I saw Making a Murderer Part 1, I couldn't believe that it was that it was happening in real time. And it goes to show the impact that Stephen's incarceration, also Brendan's incarceration, has had on the family. And you can see here the love of a mother, you know, is never ending for Stephen, and she's his number one supporter. And, you know, life somehow must go on, but it has an incredible domino effect on everyone. So it's not just the person who's in prison, but all their loved ones as well on the outside. It has totally changed everyone's life. I just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, another comment that might be worth piling on is one thing that's known about incarceration and people who are incarcerated is their sort of emotional intelligence. And I don't think Stephen's emotional intelligence is very high to start with, but your emotional intelligence is sort of put to a halt when you're incarcerated. And we got to remember, he was in prison for 18 years. Wrongfully convicted. He was only out for 3 or so. And now, since 2005, it's 2016 here, he's been in prison for another 11 years. He is, thinking like probably like a young teenager. It's not surprising that he was receptive to the advances of Lynn Hartman. I don't know that anybody who's watching this right now doesn't, if somehow you're managing to come to MAM 2 for the very first time through this podcast, I think it's worth the spoiler that that relationship didn't really go anywhere. When it became obvious that Lynn was pretty much, sort of seeking her portion of Stephen's settlement money, and that it just ended. I think, there was some spectacle on Dr. Phil show where he counseled her to sort of break it off, and some nonsense. And it's really almost not even relevant to the case, except to perhaps show what daily life is for Stephen, and maybe to show his lack of emotional intelligence. But I love to hear, Kel's thoughts on that topic exactly, because really, when it comes to emotional intelligence and that, hearing her speak on it before, I find her voice very weighty.
As a woman, I don't really have much to say about this woman, period. She's
I guess I want to pose the question to anyone who is thinking Stephen did the wrong thing. I don't know many people who would be locked up in a prison and had 40 or 50 women writing you a day, wanting your attention, seeking your attention. I would argue that many men would not be able to resist the urge to follow up on some of these potential opportunities with women. So, I think that I just want to say about Sandy, what she said was one of the best things that you could ever say as a supporter for someone who's in prison. She was just straight up. She's like, I get it. He's never had attention like this before. It's not something that I'm happy about, but I'm still going to support him. And I was kind of like, again, we've mentioned how strong Sandy is as a supporter. So that's kind of what I picked out of this little thing. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm on the wrong side of it, that, you shouldn't follow the temptation. But I just think that it would be really hard for me to do, to not want to, even if I knew it was going to blow up,
Well, just getting a little bit back to what Big Jeff was saying, though, doesn't Lynn have a bit of a backstory herself? Wasn't her ex-husband or something a law enforcement officer? And there's that premises that this was her motive, was just to hurt her ex back. What better way than to reach out to a convicted murderer and, start dating this man out of, I don't know whether it was genuine at any stage or whether it was just always purely spite, just to get the ex-husband kind of like, I know, revved up. I'm not sure. I shouldn't speculate, but I just remember that there's always been that backstory to her, and that she's got this connection to law enforcement. And as a woman, it's interesting that you would, if you dated a law enforcement man for so long, who most likely had discipline and, the whole law perspective of it, of, following the law and stuff. And then you go complete opposite to that, to a man that's in jail, incarcerated, that he also has to follow the law. He also has to follow the rules. Sometimes I always wondered, like, Did she feel like a prisoner in her marriage, and that's why she reached out to a man that was in jail because she felt just as trapped as him? Again, speculative as it is, it's just something that you have to wonder, because it's not uncommon for women to have relationships with men in jail. There's even TV shows about it, like My Fiance in Behind Bars or whatever it is. Some people think it's a fetish. Some people think that it's weird, and some people just, they don't see people just in jail as, criminals. They still see them as human beings and have empathy for them regardless of their crime. And I get that. When I was younger, I dated my boyfriend who was incarcerated for 8 years. So I didn't wait for the whole 8 years. I managed to be in a relationship with him for a year, and I was so young, I was like, nah, screw this, and we went our separate ways. But in fairness, it's just that mentality of, I don't know, as a young woman, I was just like, it was this weird sense of, I don't know, maybe immaturity on my behalf, where I was like, oh, my boyfriend's in jail. And it was like, it was a cool thing back then. Now when I look back, it wasn't. It was just naive and just, again, immature. That's all I kind of wanted to weigh in terms of the woman's side of why. But please, gentlemen, fill in the rest of this story.
Well, the way I see it in this particular case is that, you've got someone in Sandy who has a genuine love and interest and care for Stephen, and she did the hard yards. She helped get Kathleen Zellner on board. She obviously did a lot of paperwork and running around on Stephen's behalf. And you could tell that Sandy is a person of genuine character and nature. I'm afraid to say it from a male perspective, but I saw Lynn being involved with Stephen as her 15 minutes of fame. I do agree with you, Kelly. I really do believe that Lynn probably did this in order to hurt her ex-husband. You think about it. Stephen is a convicted killer, and one wonders why women would be attracted to someone like that. And in a lot of cases, and I believe in Lynn's case, it was for her 15 minutes of fame. And you can actually see when she appears on Ma'am 2, she's strutting her stuff, and people are giving her wolf whistles and giving her attention. And it's really more about Lynn rather than about Stephen. And spoiler alert, as Big Jeff said, it didn't end too well. To me, that indicates that there was absolutely no substance there, where someone like Sandy, I believe, had the right intentions all along. And you can tell because she's devoted and she's really helped Stephen, especially in his darkest moment. And I'm amazed how Stephen got, I think there was a little clip there that women sent half-naked pictures of themselves, etc., etc. For someone like Stephen, that adulation, being a male, he's thinking, wow, I'm in prison and all these women are sending me all this stuff. Unbelievable. But I do believe that he was being taken advantage of, especially by Lynn. And it's funny how he made the references to his former fiancée, right, Jody? Oh, I want no fighting. I want this to be real. I want to have a lifelong friend. I think he was having digs at Jody at the same time, which is, at the end of the day, it turned out tragically. Just my perspective, of course.
What is wrong with you? Yeah, these are the pictures that I posted.
I got my tongue out?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Ready? Yeah. Make sure to door it off.
So are you ready to come home?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. I'm ready too.
Yeah. The state says until September 11th, say that they're gonna appeal the case or let me go.
Really?
Yeah. You should hear something on the news, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
The only way that they can appeal it is like they don't think the judge did a sound job on his decision or whatever, but that really it sounded sound to me.
So, your attorneys are gonna call me too, right?
Yeah, they said that they're gonna let you know if anything happens or whatever.
Okay. Mom can't wait.
Let's think about this. Brendan has been in prison for what, almost 10 years, 10 or 11 years, and he hears the news that he's going to get out, potentially get out. But do you notice how level-headed he is? Right? He's not jumping up and down. He's not boasting. He's not laughing. He's not giggling. He is extremely level-headed. He's talking to his mum, you know, about the potential excitement of being released and coming home, etc., etc. But notice how he's still very cautious in his voice. And he even mentions the fact that the state can potentially go against what the judge said. So kudos to Brendan. He's remained level-headed. He understands the gravity of the situation and how delicate it is. That's pretty remarkable coming from Brendan.
Oh, the one of the boxes is full of my property, so.
You clean it house, huh?
Yeah, the dominoes. I could probably donate that to the unit.
Well, don't give it all away yet.
Yeah, I know. I'll wait until they say that I'm going home or whatever they say. I'll ask them if I can donate it to the unit.
Brendan's odds of getting a successful habeas corpus petition were low, and I was surprised by Judge Duffin's ruling. So I guess that's Brendan's good fortune. Judge Duffin took a few pot shots at me. His comments about my performance on certain things being indefensible, respectfully disagree. So in a sense, I was relieved that he found that the portions that were alleged to be ineffective were not valid arguments for giving Dassey a new trial. And I was kind of...
I can wait till he finishes his comments, but if you sort of make your tally of who are the big man winners and losers for man 1 and 2, you can go through the list, but when you start to sort of compile the biggest losers, Len Kaczynski, he comes off not because the documentary makes him out to be, but because his actions make him out to be one of the biggest assholes and fuckheads of this entire scenario, from his start, really ruining every single one of Brendan's chances because of his desire to talk to the media, because he's running to be a judge, colluding with the state to develop a narrative, sort of a confession-based narrative to help put Stephen away, against the complete wishes of his client, to this idiotic soliloquy that is given right now. Well, I don't think that those things were justified at all. I suppose, what's he going to say? But you know what he should say? No thanks, I'm not interested in doing the documentary. But you know what he wants? He wants to get on TV, so when he runs for judge, he can put his fake fucking smile on there, and people might think that there's something believable. I don't know how you could think there's anything believable looking at that fucking smirk, to be honest with you. I'm going to put myself on mute before I break my wife's iPad here.
I just about broke mine, but Big Jeff is 100% correct. And what is very disappointing, and I'm sure Kelly and Big Jeff and Jeff will back me up here, is that this is a consistent theme right throughout MAM 1 and MAM 2. and that is no one is prepared to say sorry. No one is prepared to say, hey, look, I did wrong. I made a mistake. I'm very, very sorry. It's a remarkable that this is a judge, Judge Duffin, right? And unfortunately, Kaczynski was correct. Judge Duffin didn't scold him for his actions, but Judge Duffin really should have really landed a couple of torpedoes going directly to Kaczynski and also O'Kelly for what they did. Now, I understand that Kaczynski, he was thrown out. So really, he had no major role during the trial. But as Big Jeff alluded to, Kaczynski and also O'Kelly had done all the damage. The damage was done, right? Just like the press conference that Kratz did, he did damage to both Stephen and Brendan. Huge damage. It's remarkable that despite what Judge Duffin said, he let really Kaczynski off the hook. And it's shocking that someone like Kaczynski will still not admit, right, Big Jeff, will still not admit to any form of wrongdoing. He believed in the strategy that he did. He wasn't acting for his client, right, guys? He was actually working with Michael O'Kelly for the state, for Mr. Kratz. He wasn't working for his client. And unfortunately, look at the consequences that we have today. Brendan Dassey is still sitting in prison for something he didn't do. And it goes to show that even when you have someone as senior as Judge Duffin in a habeas corpus, if someone has still the mindset to go after the judge's decision, we know what happened, guys, right? They weren't going to let Brendan Dassey go. And it's truly shocking that someone like Kaczynski can't even admit that he did wrong. Truly, I just shake my head in disbelief.
It is. I think that this is one of the best examples I've ever seen of someone failing upwards. When you do such a horrible job that they just promote you to get you out of there, right? And I feel like that's what he's done with his career. I would love to sometime just break down his statements piece by piece, but we don't have enough time right now. There is one that he says, Judge Duffin took some shots at me, he says. Took some shots at me. It's like he's taking it no, it's not a shot at you. It's a shot at your behavior. It's a shot at your career of the work you did. And I just think that's how people like Ken deflect it. They say, oh, he's taking personal shots at me. No, he's attacking the logic of your argument, and you're taking that personal. That's how I read it, that he's not taking responsibility for the mistakes he made, or he's taking a personal shot at me. That's his reply.
I think it actually goes deeper than that, Jeff. And that is that as a person who works in law enforcement, who works in the legal profession, he is personally shocked. I'm talking about Kaczynski, that a judge who's meant to be on his side has now been critical of another lawyer or attorney. So that's why he's basically upset that Judge Duffin is sort of like saying, hey, look, guys, you did wrong with Brendan Dassey, right? And so Kaczynski is sort of thinking, well, why would Judge Duffin do that? Why would Judge Duffin side on the side of Brendan Dassey and go against law enforcement? So Kaczynski, in a way, is sort of shocked. And he goes, oh, well, Brendan Dassey was lucky. I'll tell you what, Mr. Kaczynski, he was unlucky that you ever took his case. The amount of damage that Kaczynski, and Big Jeff will back me up on this, and same with Kelly, the amount of damage that Kaczynski and O'Kelly did, it really amounts to child abuse. It really, really does, of the highest order. It's crazy stuff.
His abuse did not stop, right? The on-bait panel of the court is also going to have some words for him, right? I think during the oral arguments of Laura Nyrider, they say that he would have been better off if Brendan had been his own counsel, for all the help he got from his original counsel. They did more damage than they did help, and he did so. His derivement didn't continue. I feel bad in a lot of ways for the citizens of Wisconsin. Can you imagine, if you somehow run afoul of the law, or, wrong, perhaps you're in front of a judge wrongfully, and you show up and you go into court, and so into your horror, who do you see sitting behind the bench but Len Meow Kaczynski? Can you imagine how horrific that must be for people? I don't know what I would do. I'd like what do you do? God, this is my judge. Are you shitting me? Oh my God.
Correct. 100% correct. But I think the bottom line here, guys, is that when you go to trial, you got to have everything running correct the first time round. Do you agree, guys? Everything's got to run correctly for you the first time round. There's no point going around the block 10 times trying to repair the damage that your own legal attorney has done towards you, because that damage is irreparable no matter what. It has to go right. And unfortunately for Brendan, everything that you can imagine went wrong for that poor kid right from the get-go.
Yeah, you've made that point a couple of times, Dr. Silkman, because it is an important point. And I think it is a reminder to make it a little more practical, is like, you really have to make sure that if you're accused of a crime, or someone that's accused of a crime, you have to make smart decisions early on, and you need to get the proper representation early on. Yeah, and I think that, just to spiderweb a little bit from you, sir, not to go too far, but that's why it's important not to talk to the police unless you have a lawyer. And just say, we've said it before, but just a reminder.
I 100% correct there, guys. And I remember the biggest mistake, because I did an analysis of this. The biggest mistake Brendan Dassey did was actually speaking to Detective O'Neill at Crivets on November the 6th, and everything went downhill from there, right? If Brendan Dassey had proper legal representation back then, he wouldn't have been in the situation he found himself today. And that's very, very sad, because it's true. Anything you tell law enforcement will be used against you in a court of law. And that's exactly what happened, because unfortunately for Brendan, the only thing that they could use against him were his own words, nothing else, because there was nothing from a forensic standpoint that could link Brendan to any nefarious activity on October the 31st. They could not even link forensically Brendan to Teresa Halbach or her RAV4. And yet that poor kid is still sitting in a cell in prison. That's very, very scary, guys.
He found that the portions that were alleged to be ineffective were not valid arguments for giving Dassey a new trial. And I was kind of relieved that he found that there was a legitimate issue on the voluntariness of the confession. I mean, I'm the one that laid the foundation for that. I filed the motion to suppress. We litigated it pretty thoroughly, including the school psychological records and the transcript of the interrogation and so forth. So, I mean, I thought I did my job.
The man who prosecuted the cases against Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey is speaking exclusively to Action 2 News. Emily Matesic sits down with Ken Kratz, who told us about his reaction to the overturned conviction.
Like many following the cases against Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey, former Calumet County District Attorney Ken Kratz, who led the prosecution of both men, was surprised to hear Dassey's conviction had been overturned by a federal magistrate.
To be sitting on the sideline with the rest of the citizenry and only being able to sit back and just hear what happens from news agencies or something else is an awkward, uncomfortable position for me personally.
If it were up to him, Kratz says the logical thing to do is file an appeal.
You know, I really want to use some harsh words here, and I'm sure Big Jeff is, and same with Kelly. But bloody hell. Did you look at the smirk on Ken Kratz's face?
Oh my God, he loves it. He loves every second of it.
Yeah, because you know that he was part of the prosecuting team that put Brendan Dassey in prison for life, based on just words. And I'll tell you right now, Ken Kratz, all of them would have been shitting themselves, thinking, oh my God, there's a possibility of not only Brendan Dassey being released, but also potentially Stephen Avery being released too. Because if Brendan's cases collapse, then that's going to strengthen and support potentially the release of Stephen Avery. I'm not saying that the two are related, but remember, both of them were convicted for murdering the same victim under two different circumstances, right? You had two different murder trials, the same victim, but different scenarios. And let me tell you right now, in Mr. Kratz's book, Kratz wrote that he was very, very disappointed and unhappy with Judge Duffin's decision to throw out the confession and say it was involuntarily gained. That, let me tell you right now, that set up alarm bells and red flags throughout the Wisconsin community, because here was the potential for Brendan Dassey to be released. Now think about it, guys. If Brendan is released, he's now able to talk to the press. And that's going to put a lot of pressure now on all the law enforcement, including the prosecuting attorney, saying, hey, how did you possibly fuck this up? So you could imagine that red flags would have immediately gone up as soon as Judge Duffin let his report out.
And let's face it, too, Ken Kratz never met a camera he didn't like. It must have been a present turnabout for him to go from being interviewed about his, sexting of domestic abuse victims that caused his law license to be taken away, to actually being interviewed under a positive light, back in the old glory days when he actually had something to hang his hat on instead of, disgraced District Attorney Kratz, who like Len Kaczynski, was sort of caught with his hand in the cookie jar with regard to, very inappropriate comment when it came to, very inappropriate behavior when it came to, frankly, the opposite sex, right? I mean, there's two guaranteed sex predators that I know of, and they're Kratz and Kaczynski.
That's a good point. I find it, the thing that strikes me about Ken Kratz is that his work is potentially being undone, and he can't stop smiling because someone's asking his opinion in front of a camera. And I think it's just, like you guys said, it just shows his personality. It shows who he is. And it's rather disgusting, in my opinion.
The state has three basic options right now. First, they could release Brendan, and that could happen at any time. Their second option is to initiate a retrial of Brendan. If they choose to do that, they have to begin those proceedings within 90 days. And then their third option would be to appeal this ruling that just came down, granting Brendan's petition for a writ of habeas corpus. If they do appeal that ruling, then everything else gets put on hold while that appeal goes forward.
You got to understand, right? The state just went through the trauma of Stephen Avery being exonerated in 2003, right? The whole trauma, and the fact that Stephen Avery had a civil suit going against Kacerek, Vogel, and the MTSO. Could you imagine if Brendan Dassey got released? It would have been another tsunami for them. Oh my God, not only did we fuck up back in 2003 with Stephen's wrongful conviction for the brutal, vicious sexual assault against Penny Bernstein, now we're releasing Brendan Dassey, right? So could you imagine the effect on the Wisconsin community, especially the law fraternity, the fact that not only did they have to exonerate Stephen Avery, they now had to release Brendan Dassey. Why? Because Fassbender and Wiegert coerced a confession from him. You could imagine the effect that would have had, right? So now you know why Brad Schimmel had to put a stop to this ASAP. I don't know what Big Jeff and Kelly think, but this would have been another disaster for Wisconsin at a very bad time for them.
I think you're 100% correct. I mean, it's not going to look very good as their Stephen Avery's lawsuit. Stephen Avery's case is moving forward to have Brendan released. That's going to that would have drawn a lot of attention on the judiciary, the decision making, the negative press, and made some of his arguments in the previous motion much more viable, I think.
Tweet last month, Kathleen Zellner promised a tsunami of new evidence is on the way. Through her tweets, Zellner hints at her case, planted evidence, cell phone tower records, and DNA samples. She even hints at a new suspect. Zellner is expected to file a motion in the case as early as Thursday.
Supporters of Stephen Avery waiting outside the Manitowoc County Courthouse for a second day, waiting to hear appeals lawyer Kathleen Zellner's alternate theory of the death of Teresa Halbach.
The small crowd gathering at the Manitowoc County Courthouse is hopeful that tweets and Facebook posts have some truth. And Stephen Avery's attorney, Kathleen Zellner, is coming to town.
No sign of Zellner today.
It didn't happen today. We'll have to wait at least until tomorrow to see if Avery's attorney, Kathleen Zellner, will be filing a new motion in the case.
I will be here tomorrow morning, bright and early at 8:30 when the courthouse opens. Reporting live in Manitowoc, Gabrielle Mays, Fox 11 News.
You can't throw this office. We are open for business. Right, we're just going to go in order, one camera, two at a time.
Three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine,
Like
10.
you're talking.
Like I'm talking on TV or just
Yeah.
talking?
I think the best thing is maybe if we pull in the parking lot, then we've got to get out though and walk further.
What if I just drop you off in front of
See, the problem is they're just going to mob me.
Oh, it's just gonna be all kinds
I
of
think
people.
what we do is pull in next to Scott in the parking lot, then we get out. One guy in front, two on either side, and I'm in the middle. It's like a little triangle.
Yeah,
And we're
sure.
inside of it, right?
So Elvis used to come into the country.
Really?
Yeah. They're surrounded by guys.
Yeah, that's what you do. It's like,
So you're Elvis.
I'm Elvis now. It's ridiculous. When I did a case once in Indiana, it was so crazy. They were climbing on the car.
I'm so excited. Give me a I'm Stephen's cousin, yes. And I can't get this smile off my face. I'm so excited. I'm so happy. I will stand behind Stephen 110% to the end.
Can I just make a comment there, Jeff? It's very interesting that Kim Jukat showed up at the courthouse or at the place where Kathleen Zellner is going to put in her filing, because we're doing a recent reading with the crew, and Kim Jukat was and I put in quotation, a confidential informant that informed law enforcement that they should check the incinerators on the Avery salvage yard, which is really interesting. So she phoned in a tip, but she also mentioned the fact that they were barking up the wrong tree, which is rather remarkable when you think about it. So not only did she call in a tip about checking the incinerators on the property, but she was basically insinuating that Stephen had nothing to do with the disappearance of Teresa Halbach or the murder of Teresa Halbach. So it's
You
rather
mean the smelters, right? Not the incinerators, but the
Oh
smelters.
no! That the smelters with the Sakiki note. That was different. The actual word smelter, aluminum smelter, was mentioned on the Sakiki note, which is what we're doing at the moment with reading with the crew. but she phoned in a tip to check the incinerator. They were aware of the Avery property actually had a smelter, a small aluminum smelter on site, as well as a place where they used to burn wood for heating. So she phoned in a tip very early on in the investigation to say, hey, check out put it this way, the law in the report that the law enforcement wrote, they said, yes, we are aware of the incinerators on the property, and they were checked. So it's remarkable that she phoned in the tip. She was referred to as a confidential informant, and here she is meeting Zellner, which is rather remarkable. Incredible coincidence.
Wisconsin.
Yes, thank you.
What are you here to do?
There we go. Okay. What am I here to do? I'm here to file a motion for new scientific testing.
Can you talk about what kind of this DNA? Are you talking about the testing?
Many types of
preservative that was related to
No, there's many more tests in it. Let me file it and I'll come back out and talk about it.
Did you bring extra copies by chance?
We did.
Excellent. You're a pro, I guess. Now, this is something that you could have done via fax, I understand, from the clerk.
No.
Is there a reason you felt it was important to be here today?
Yes, such an important motion for the case.
You guys can back up a little.
Hello, I'm Kathleen Zellner. Yeah, nice to meet you. Okay, so we want to get a bunch of
That's the
original.
The original?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what was filed first? I wish Jack were here because he'd know the answer to this off the top of his head. What was filed first? This new motion for scientific testing, or her alternative motion for post-conviction relief?
It was for scientific testing.
That was first. Okay.
Yep. Motion for post-conviction scientific testing.
Thank you.
Okay, doesn't matter.
Yeah. We'll take it with us. We just filed a motion for new scientific testing. So why don't I go out instead of being pinned in here?
Probably outside.
Yeah, don't you think? Yeah. Yeah, let's just go back outside.
Can you say something to the family?
Let's go outside, okay? So we're not interfering with court business. Okay, so is everyone out? Yeah, step back. Everyone step back. Okay, so your question probably is, what did I just file? I filed a motion for new scientific testing on the Stephen Avery case. We're requesting to test dozens of items from the crime scene. I think this will be the most comprehensive testing motion ever filed in the state of Wisconsin, probably one of the most comprehensive motions ever filed in the United States. There were many items that should have been DNA tested that weren't. So for us, the case is amazing how much forensic evidence there is that can be tested. For the public, I think the most reassuring thing is that we are going to get to the bottom of who killed Teresa Halbach. And we firmly believe that we will establish that it was not Stephen Avery. So anyway, that's all I have to say. We have copies, though. You have copies. Yeah, why don't you hand those out?
Thank you.
Yes.
Copies, we will
You'll enjoy reading
email it.
And if it does come back and shows that that blood is from 2005,
Gee, that'll be the risk that we're taking. Every client I represent, I tell them, you want to be innocent when you hire me because I'll get to the bottom of it with the testing. And so Mr. Avery has encouraged us to do all of these tests. But remember, there are a lot of things planted in this. So we're not just talking blood, we're talking buccal swabs. There's a lot of different variations on this. So that's the problem. If you do something, if you did plant the evidence, that science is going to catch up with you. And that's what we're going to see in this.
So you're going to have to wait till everything is back before Steve can even be considered to be released?
I don't imagine it will take that long once we get the test because he never made any incriminating statements.
That's right.
All right. So you're down to the evidence at the crime scene. You're down to the key, the hood latch, the blood in the ref, and the bullet.
Does this go to a hearing? Do you know where?
Okay, let's go.
No more questions.
I gotta go. Bye-bye.
I'm sure Kelly will comment on this. I'm not sure which reporter said, or what happens if the blood is actually from 2005. Well, let me tell you right now, the blood is from 2005. So a bit of a spoiler alert there. A couple of years ago, a team of researchers and I'm sure Kelly will comment on this, a group of researchers took the cutting from the seat, the passenger seat. Cherie Cohen had isolated genomic DNA from that cutting, and it came back positive in terms of giving Stephen Avery's genomic DNA profile. That's blood on the seat. And remember, and we'll discuss this later on, of course, in MAM, but Dr. LeBeau from the FBI, they came up with a new test that confirmed that there was no EDTA present in the swabs that they tested in that car, in the RAV4, which tends to indicate that the blood was not from a blood vial containing EDTA. And a group of researchers a few years ago, they actually used a technique called DNA methylation, in which they can actually age the blood. They can determine the age, the so-called DNA methylation age, the epigenetic age of the DNA. And from their analysis, and I did a presentation on this, which is on YouTube, the researchers were able to establish that the DNA present in the cutting from the seat is indeed closer to 2005. So it's rather remarkable that a journalist asked Kathleen Zellner, well, what happens if that DNA comes back and it's from 2005? Let me tell you right now, that DNA, now notice what I said, DNA, not blood, that DNA is definitely closer to Stephen Avery's age when he was at 2005. That DNA is definitely not from 1996. Just to keep that in the back of your mind.
And you're like, Kelly will say something about this. I was actually waiting for you. I'm like, Dr. Silkman's got this covered. And you did. I just wanted to kind of put in there that, something that you've already highlighted, and that was when Kathleen said, gee, it's going to be risky if it comes back to 2005. And we now know it did. And people will go, well, so what does that mean? Well, in hindsight, what it means for the courts, at least, it's hard for Kathleen because she can't then rely on a vial, because a vial and showing that there's a planting happening is quite more straightforward. It's like, there you go. If it wasn't fresh, it was from a vial, there's your kind of answer to the whole, framing situation. But when you have fresh blood, the courts are now got that in front of them and they're going to go, so you're trying to tell me that the fresh blood had to be planted from an alternative narrative from someone who's got to have all these skills, tools, and knowledge of how to use blood in a forensic manner versus it's fresh blood now because Stephen Avery just bled in the car. Unfortunately, there is no testing for framing. So in hindsight and the overall picture, I think what Kathleen's saying is, oh, well then, that's not going to be great for us. It's because it just makes it a little bit more harder. It's because that's what the judge is now going to have to rely on. So you're admitting that it's fresh blood. Well, yes, it is. So you're admitting that it's fresh blood, and I've got two alternatives. I either have to believe that I can say this now because this is what's in the motion, but a 19-year-old happened to just coincidentally be in the right place at the right time to see their uncle plead, have all the tools, equipment, and knowledge to be able to remove it and then plant it versus it's fresh blood because Stephen did it. That is where Kathleen is got to find her balance. And I think that with the right kind of cluster of everything else, she could get there. Absolutely. But it's just getting there because you've got to get the judge to oversee the logicness of it to begin with. And if you can't get them there, they'll just keep denying it because they'll say, no, I'm not accepting that narrative. It's just too complicated versus I can just rule it as Stevens because it's the Ockman's razor of the case. And I just wanted to highlight, I don't want to go too much into this because it's not my research and I don't, it's not fair that I indulge in it, but I will just highlight it. We have Avery Wave, a terrific supporter and researcher of the case. She actually messaged personally, had correspondence between the team that did Kathleen's testing of the aging of the blood. And not only did they test individually whether it was a fresh blood, but they actually did their own genomic testing, and they actually confirmed to her it came back Stephen Avery's. So I think we can fairly say now, because I know a lot of people always say out there in the community, which is completely understandable because we don't know everything, but this is where the confusion still is happening, where everyone's like, what if it was swabs, or what if it's the real killer's blood? And she just said it was Stephen's. Kathleen was given the seat clippings from the RAV with this blood in it. It was that blood that was sent and was tested. And they not only confirmed it was fresh, they also confirmed it was absolutely Stephen's profile. Nobody else's but Stephen's. And it's a lot, and I've always agreed that the swabs could have easily been swapped, but I do have to agree with Carla and the researchers that did the testing is it's a lot harder to fake the RAV seat cover because that is so easily can be disputed and so easily uncovered. If you finally got hold of the RAV, or even if you don't even need the RAV, you can do research on that seat cover to make sure that it would match a RAV 1999 Toyota. And if it didn't, then you can go, why have I got seat covers here from a Land Cruiser or a Suzuki? Why is it not matching? So I think it's authentic, and I think that we have to call it out for what it is, that it'd be a high risk to send Kathleen fake seat covers when it would be so easily uncovered by just a little bit of research to make sure that fabric matched a RAV4. And thank you, Dr. Silkman, because you really did cover it before I got to have anything to say.
Oh, no hassles at all. And everyone on the panel agrees. We can talk about anything you want in this case, but we need to explain the blood in the RAV4. There's no question about it. And Kelly's correct. Yep, Kelly's correct. I also received notification, I think it must have been from the same person. She had contacted the researchers who had done the DNA methylation studies, and they did do a genomic profile from that blood, from the DNA that they extracted from the car seat cover, and it came back as Stephen Avery's genomic DNA profile. That means there's no doubt that that seat cover has now been independently tested by at least two people, Culhane and this research group, and they both came back with the profile of Stephen Avery. Now, notice I'm being very cautious here. I'm saying genomic DNA. We can't say anything about the red blood cells, and the reason why is because this now, and we'll see what, I'd like to hear Kelly's comments here. This is important, guys, because it means that there are only two possible sources that blood could have come from. Three, actually. One, Stephen, and this is why Kelly keeps on emphasizing what a judge is going to say. One, it actually meant that Stephen Avery bled in that RAV4. He actually was inside the RAV4 and bled. Doesn't necessarily mean that he killed Teresa Halbach, but it makes it very uncomfortable now for him and for Kathleen Zellner trying to defend him. So either he was in that RAV4 and bled in the RAV4. Two, someone took blood from the sink and was able to go to the RAV4 within 30 minutes before the blood congeals and plant that blood in the RAV4. And as Kelly pointed out, the more often you go to a crime scene, the greater the chance of you leaving your own DNA at the crime scene. Three, it points to one institution, one person that could carry out this ruse, and that's straight in the crime lab. And by that I mean, now don't laugh, because this is actually a very serious problem, and that is the production of fake blood. And by that I mean, you can take anybody's red blood cells, because really the problem with red blood cells is that they don't contain a nucleus, they don't contain genomic DNA. You can take anybody's red blood cells and squirt in genomic DNA and plant it. By doing that, it means that you can put a person that you've put the genomic DNA from at a crime scene. So it's creating fake blood. And researchers have done this. They've done experiments to prove you can't tell the difference between normal blood and fake blood, because you leave behind a genomic DNA profile. Now, before everyone laughs and says, oh, come on, where the hell are they going to get Stephen Avery's genomic DNA from? And the answer is, Culhane already had it in 2003 with a swab, item W, and she did extract Stephen's DNA back in 2003, which, when you look at the DNA methylation studies, is much more closer than 1996. So it's interesting. I'm not saying that's what happened, but as Kelly pointed out, it now narrows down where that blood could have come from. Thank you.
So I mean, just for the layman's, Dr. Silkman, just can you go a little bit deeper into the, just in general, not necessarily in this case, the specific sources through which you could get this genomic DNA sample from? For example, a buccal swab, but for example, where can you get it?
Correct. As part of Stephen's exoneration, and again, I did a presentation on this, so I followed all the documents. The Wisconsin Crime Lab received a buccal swab from Stephen, item W. It's a buccal swab. Cherie Culhane had extracted genomic DNA as part of the exoneration. So she would have had not only item W, which is a buccal swab, but pure genomic DNA belonging to Stephen in the crime lab. And she's the one that did the experiments. Now, I'm not saying anything that she did anything nefarious, but if you wanted to create fake blood, it's very easy, which means that, remember, a PCR test determines your genomic profile from DNA, right? So you normally would do an extraction, you obtain pure DNA, you do a PCR, and you get a profile. To create fake blood is actually very easy. So you can obtain blood from anybody, including an animal, spin it down, and take the blood, the red blood cells. Red blood cells don't have a nucleus, which means there's no genomic DNA in red blood cells. All you need to do to create fake blood is then take an aliquot of pure genomic DNA and squirt it with the red blood cells, mix it. You then use that to seed a crime scene. And a research group actually did analysis on this, and they were horrified because you can actually create a fake crime scene using fake blood. Now, the question is, come on, where are you going to get genomic DNA from Stephen from? And the answer is the Wisconsin Crime Lab already had not only item W, but they had pure genomic DNA belonging to Stephen Avery, right? And the age of that DNA was from 2003, which means that if you look at the DNA methylation analysis, it puts it closer to 2005 than it was from 1996. So it seems to match. That's scary. Or the other alternative is what I discussed, either Stephen bled in the RAV4, or someone got the blood from the sink and planted it in the RAV4. So that analysis, the DNA methylation analysis, now narrows it right down. Right, Kelly? It narrows it right down.
But what you're saying though is, if I'm trying to understand what you're saying as a layman, as long as they have some source of his DNA, they can use it to score it in there. They had access to his whole bedroom for 6 days. They could have used his slippers, his socks, his clothes.
Blood and saliva, Big Jeff.
Okay,
Correct.
all right. That was the question. Okay, thank you.
Correct. So I went online and I've been doing some research and I found an article and I found this, fabricating DNA evidence. So scientists actually fabricated blood and saliva using the DNA from another person, then the donor of the DNA that they supplied of the blood and saliva, and turned it in to the person they were fabricating. So the original donor DNA kind of disappeared and it morphed into this fabricated one. Is that right, Dr. Silkman, in terms of how I've interpreted that?
Correct. But the scary thing about the fake blood is that you can put in a pure source of genomic DNA, and the only person that's going to come up is the DNA that you add to the blood. And that's the scary thing. So if you're doing a test, and saying, oh, look, I took a swab of this blood. And remember, we've discussed that. Sure, you can swap swabs, no problems. But this is a car seat cover. Trying to swap a car seat cover is much more difficult. So remember, if you're going to seed the RAV, you need DNA before Culhane goes into the RAV4 to take a swab, which means you need a source of DNA. If you're going to plant it, you need to plant it from the 5th to the 6th. So when the RAV4 goes through the crime lab, that's when you add the blood in the RAV4.
Well, yeah, you've got there on the second line. They also showed that if they had access to a DNA profile in the database, that they could construct a sample of DNA to match that profile without obtaining any tissue from that person. So exactly what Dr. Silkman just said, as long as they already had it, they can use it. And funny enough, again, I don't want to speak out of terms because this wasn't my correspondence with the team, but I did ask Avery Wave, did you in fact approach this? Because this is a variable that I think needs to be addressed. She said, I did actually. I sent them something like, I don't think it was this per se, but it was on those lines. And she said they never got back to her. They stopped all correspondence when she started asking these questions.
Correct. And remember, the amazing thing is that Culhane was able to pull out Stephen's genomic DNA profile from a criminal database. I believe it was on November the 10th, which meant that his DNA profile was already in the Wisconsin DNA database. Now, I understand that when you're in jail, they take a buccal swab and eventually they do a genomic DNA profile and they put it into the criminal database. But remember, Culhane had isolated genomic DNA from Stephen in 2003, I believe, and would have obtained an updated genomic DNA profile. And it's likely that she is the one that uploaded it into the database. That meant that Culhane knew Stephen's genomic DNA profile back in 2003. So potentially, if you have genomic DNA from Stephen, you can amplify it up and get his profile, right? So as Kelly pointed out, you can construct a crime scene without you even being there. That's the scary bit.
Well, I'm so glad you guys brought those comments to us. Thank you, Dr. Silkman and Kel, for explaining that thoroughly for us. And unfortunately, it does bring us to that point to hand it over to Big Jeff. So, Big Jeff, we saw a little bit of the Brendan saga in the beginning. Some of Stephen's family and personal story kind of unfolded, and we ended with KZ dropping a motion for scientific testing. So, It was a pretty wide
Yeah.
open episode. A lot's happened. So what say you, Big Jeff? And I just wanted to say welcome back again. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, for that. And to me, when I see Kathleen Zellner filing the motions, my mind just consistently goes to the fact that her biggest blunder on this case was that she did not incorporate her motion for post-conviction relief in with Stephen's pro se motion. Rather, she dismissed the pro se motion and filed her own new motion, which in the places where they overlap, she became procedurally barred. So seeing her go in and filing motions, it just kind of it's bittersweet to me. It was when I watched it the first time, I had some inner feeling of triumph because she's got the most post-conviction exonerations in the whole world. If you're going to have a lawyer for this, you want her. She's the best one that there is. There's no doubt. But she's human too, and I think she did make that mistake. Moreover, the testing on I'm not sure whether it was this motion or another agreement that had her doing some testing on the RAV4, and that motion was later completely and totally squashed by Judge Angie, who ruled on Zellner's motion for post-conviction relief, denying any further testing on the RAV. It just shows you just the level of corruption. They don't want her near that RAV. They're completely afraid of the stuff that she was bringing. And I kind of have this fear that they have her fenced off from a lot of the stuff that she had that was that was the really good stuff, and the stuff we're left with is a little bit marginal. That's not to say that I don't support the boys. I very much do. But I think I fear that Kathleen may have been slightly outmaneuvered on this one. But anyway, it's only episode 4. There's a lot of good stuff to go with regard to evidence and fodder for flinching the guilters, and we press on with our support of Stephen and Brendan. So on to the next.
Thank you for those comments there, Big Jeff, and I agree. On to the next. Dr. Silkman, if you please wouldn't give us your wrap-up comments. Saw a lot today in just this little bit.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the episode today, and it's great to see Big Jeff back with his comments and wisdom, and hopefully for a speedy recovery for Big Jeff. This episode, I'll just sum it up really quickly. It represented a real lot of trouble for the state. It really did, because you had Judge Duffin's decision, basically that the confession from Brendan Dassey was coerced, has to be tossed out. That caused a lot of problems. And here we can see Kathleen Zellner filing a new motion for scientific testing. And I really enjoyed the discussion regarding the DNA and the blood. Fantastic. I'm really, really happy so far. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a fantastic episode, and the discussions were amazing. Thank you again, Dr. Silkman. And Kel, if you wouldn't please lead us out of episode 16.
Sure. Again, there's nothing to really say in terms of the episode because the boys kind of covered that. But I just wanted to say that it is awesome to always go back to what we know now and compare it to what was happening then. I think it kind of fills in all the gaps that we kind of hung on to for so long, and now it can kind of have a certain sense of closure. Although I say the word closure, it's far from it in terms of the possibilities of what actually happened, but it kind of it gives us more of a, not such a loose end of a path to be walking on. We can kind of, keep the balance and have more of an understanding. And I think that's what all these episodes kind of do for us. It just gives us that more enrichment of an understanding of the baseline of this whole tragedy. I think I speak for everyone when I say that this is not a misinjustice for one. This is a misinjustice for 3 people. There are 3 victims here. And I'm absolutely not taking this away from Teresa because unfortunately it was her life that was lost. but it's beyond just that in a nutshell. It's other people were affected. And I know that someone, I think it was Big Jeff, that said that throughout this podcast, that it affects everyone, the whole family. It has a butterfly effect. Just because these two gentlemen are in jail, it affects everybody, and it affects Teresa's family. They were having to go through the fact that that Brendan was going to go out, and they were at that stage. And I still believe that from today, that they believe that these two men are guilty. So for them, it's probably really hard for them to comprehend. And I don't ever try to get my head into their feelings, because I don't think you can fairly do that. Everyone grieves different. Everyone interprets things different. And yeah, I just think that as we continue along this journey and we backfill with the hindsight information that we have, the most we can ask for is a better understanding of the justice system and where do we go from here. And that's where I'm comfortable right now, is I'm looking at the now. I know I've said that before, but I think that's really important, because it's what can help the boys now. I know that it's really great that we go back and we recap on all the tragedies and all the, the spider webs of the case, and we're hitting on it all, but it's ultimately half of that now is procedurally barred. Although we're bringing it up, it can't even be used in the court of law as of now. So that's my focus, and I'm glad to be on a journey with all of you to be able to see that. And I, as always, so happy to see Big Jeff back. He's one of my favorites in persons in the whole world. And I love you guys, and I'm so glad that we're all still a great team. And thank you everyone for always joining us. And I know sometimes some comments we get back can be, not exactly directed at one individual, but we all do have different opinions. And if we all thought the same, then this case wouldn't move anywhere in terms of understanding, because if we all thought the same, other people wouldn't be seeing things that the other don't. And sometimes you need someone to point out something. So again, thank you to everyone, and Happy New Year.
Thank you, Kelly, for those comments. Absolutely. I don't think there's any more I could possibly add to that. So for Big Jeff and Dr. Silkman and Kel and Jack at home, he'll be back soon. This is Jeff Jones saying this has been Discussing a Murderer.
Bye, everybody.